Okay, hello guys, welcome back to another video. Severance season 2 episode 8, a short one, which we knew last week. You can see the runtime. It was 37 minutes. We could see last week, but I think I mentioned that. I may not have. If I didn't, I'm sorry. But it was short, but it still felt short. It definitely felt it. I mean, it makes sense. But even though it was short, we learned a lot, and I have a lot of notes. So first, we open on the ocean. Some ocean shots of the water hitting the rocks, and we see Cobell driving near this cold water with icebergs and stuff. They talk about the filming location in the after credits. I'll talk about that. And then we see a sign where it says Salt Neck. Salt's Neck is the city, and if you may remember, this was in season 2 episode 3 when Cobell drove next to this sign before. It's not the same one, but it was a sign on a street that showed how many miles away the city was. She was going to go there, but then she turned around. Now we know where this is. We know this is her hometown, and it's a lot more, it has a lot more to do with Lumen. But I like the shots, this sequence of just following her drive through the place while we get an idea of, you know, where she lives. We get the tone, we get the vibe, and it sets the mood for the rest of the episode, which is smart, and I appreciate it. But I really did like the wide shot of going up on the camera, showing us the entire city that we're dealing with, all in one shot. It's not very big, but we get an idea. And then I think it's also worth noting this is a fictional city, in case you didn't know. This is not a real place. And then the intro hits, but it's not really the intro. It's the same thing as season 2 episode 4, season 2 episode 1, and season 1 episode 1, where it just shows the word Severance kind of blinking into it. It's short, it's sweet, and it allows, I guess they've done it on episodes where it wouldn't, where it feels like they want you to get the vibe of being somewhere else than normal. And on the season openers, I guess they just wanted to get you right into it. I don't know why they did that then, but season 2 episode 4, in this episode, it felt like they just wanted you to understand the tone and feel of the episode, and the intro might have disturbed that. But we see Cobell brushing her teeth while she watches a man huffing, I guess. Yeah. And this is where she realized that this man's has gotten something sold to him, and we later know that Hampton is the one who sold to this man. But then he follows this by taking deep breaths in a paper bag, which actually, now that I think about it, might be the huffing itself. Or I think it sounded like he was just trying to catch his breath after. I don't know. Doesn't matter too much. But we see Cobell littering. I feel like that matters, you know? She just chucks her water bottle. I mean, that's not very nice. And then she gets a call from Devin, which we don't really see what she does with it right then, but I mean, they don't talk about it, so I mean, it's clear that she didn't answer then. And then we cut to another thing I've mentioned before like a few times now, but I'm gonna mention it again. I love when Severance starts you in a scene and you don't know where you are or who you're looking at or anything. Like, that's how we started with these two older people in this building. We don't even know the size, we don't even know where it is, but we start with these older people. Some conversation. Dutch Stevens flipped a 2-ton snowplow, apparently. Making some conversation while Hampton's pouring coffee. Then we get the name of the older lady, which is Rose. We never get the name of the man. But then we go back to Cobell driving, and we see the little place that is actually where we started with the older people. We see it from the outside now. It's a small place. And Cobell enters. She sits with some aggressive staring with this guy. I'll keep calling him this guy. You know, I'll call him Hampton. We get the reveal all the way at the end with Hampton. And then Cobell says this.
Well, flip my toboggan.
So that's cool. And she doesn't want coffee, but she's here for him. She doesn't say that, but it's clear if she's not here for the coffee, she's here for him. She says that the town is older than she remembers, and she says this while looking at the older people as well. Maybe some people she knew are much older than she remembers, but she's also at the same time talking about the town itself and its state. And then Cobell says she needs a favor and for him to meet her at the factory. And then Hampton tells Rose to close up after him at the Drippy Pot Cafe. Interesting name, but I mean, I feel like it's maybe too much responsibility for this lady. But, you know, I could be underestimating Rose. But then we see him like drive around town, and we see there's this one building in the back here, this red one with the word Lumen on it, and it looks old, obviously. So it was a while ago that building or label was established. And then we see the Lumen symbol once again, Lumen Industries with the Lumen Factory. And my first thought here was the painting that we've seen Irv and Bert talk about, where Kier and Imogene, I'm pretty sure her name is Imogene, his wife, basically, they met at an ether mill. And I'll talk about that here in a second, but that's what it reminded me of when I saw this factory. And I was wondering if is this like the original factory or ether mill? They call it the ether mill and the ether factory multiple times here in the show, and I wonder if this is what they're talking about. But they both park ahead of each other, and Hampton says, "You know how effed up it is to ask me to come back here?" And she doesn't regard him. She says, "I need you to drive me to Sissy's." And she says if they're watching the house, they will recognize the car. I wonder if they'll recognize the car and then they'll stop her from coming in, I guess. And Hampton says that Sissy still lives by the 9 as a pariah. So the 9 is what they call the house in that area. I wonder if that's just, they don't really explain what it is, but when I think of the 9 for this show, I think of the 9 core principles. Maybe that's why they named it that. That'd be my guess. Cobell says she needs something. She needs something there, and she needs him to drive her. He says no and asks why he would even help her. And she says, "We were once chums, participating in child labor." And then brings up that Kier and Imogene met in the ether mill. And he says something like, was she spitting up guts too or something? And I'm sorry, I didn't really care. I more so cared that he knew who Kier was, which is kind of strange. Like, you go to this small town, you mention the name Kier. I mean, if you don't work on Lumen, I don't expect you to know who I'm talking about, unless you've seen Severance. But he knows, so that was interesting. And we get a little more of an idea throughout the episode that this whole town probably knows. Cobell says, "I will not be a punching dummy for your resentments." And then that's when he agrees to drive her across a bumpy road with her in the back. And at the same time, she's still getting calls from Devin. And the camera pans across the water to show Sissy's house. But it's definitely interesting. She says the ether mill instead of an ether mill or something. Like when Bert and Irving were talking, she says the ether mill. Like she knows exactly the ether mill that she's talking about, and so does he. And I mean, there's a lot of theories you can make here. I'm guessing it might be the same factory or some other ether mill they know, I'm guessing. But it seems like if it is one they know, it seems like the roots of Lumen like have been here at this Salt's Neck for a long time. And they started here, and Cobell just happened to be where they started, and they took her with her on her journey. Obviously she wasn't born when Kier was born, but there's some starting point of Lumen that she was along the ride for. Cobell comes out of the car and goes up to this house, and the guy says, Hampton says, "Tell her to drop dead for me." And then Cobell opens the door, or actually Sissy opens the door first and says, "You are not welcome here." Cobell completely ignores her, goes straight up the stairs to a room with markings of heights and ages of herself, Harmony, Cobell. They stop at age 12. Maybe that tells us that's when her mother died. Or maybe that tells us that's when she got taken away. No, I mean, we see a picture later where she looks older. But I wonder why else they'd stop at 12, because she is taller than her 12-year-old mark. But the lady, known as Sissy Cobell, and she has a full name, I'll talk about just in a second, but doesn't want the Huff Peddler on her property, referring to the man who is Hampton. And Cobell's dislike of his breath kind of makes sense, right? So he's been huffing and he's been selling at the same time, and she kind of feels a little bit upset about this. Cobell mentions it a little more, that she's upset that he's selling and kind of bringing this on the rest of the town that she grew up in and has some love for, and then also that he has to go through that he's getting high or whatnot. Like I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like laugh there, but Cobell seeing Hampton like this is a big plot point, as we can see toward the end of the episode. But Cobell says that she gave him the thirst for it, she being Sissy. Maybe some emotional trauma or something that made him, I don't know, want to cope with it. But then Cobell touches this single stuffy. She obviously has some sort of connection with it. And she looks at the age markings again, and then goes out of this room to pass by two plaques on the wall that are both from Lumen Industries. We can only read one of them, and it says Quarterly Striver, and it says fourth quarter year of vision. I think it says Youth Apprentice something. I believe the third word starts with an M, and matron. No, is that even a word? I don't know. I can't read it. I'm sorry. Let me know if you can. But it says Celestine Sissy Cobell for short. Then Cobell asks what was done with her things. Sissy says she sold them, and Cobell asks if anyone was around or came over, took anything. But apparently Mr. Drummond telephoned, and Sissy says, "What have you done, little mouse?" And Cobell rips away the phone cord from the phone. And Cobell wants the keys to her mother's room. And Sissy says it stays shut until all who remember her sit with Kier. You know that. And she says, "You bring nothing but woe into my life." Another mention of the temper, woe. And Cobell wants to know what her mother's final words were. Sissy says, "Do not test me." And Cobell says, "You pulled the tube from her gullet so she couldn't say anything." And then Cobell gets slapped. And there's definitely some religious cult upbringing idea that we're getting for Cobell. And Sissy says there was gratitude in her mother's eyes from being killed, essentially, with the tube, to be freed from her suffering. And perhaps if she were a believer, that she would have found solace in the 9. And I'm guessing maybe the area, or solace in the 9 core principles. That's definitely interesting. But Cobell says she wishes she were here, but she was at school. And Sissy says that's where she belonged. And Cobell's upset that she didn't get to say goodbye. And then Sissy says, "It's okay, you had to stay with your studies. Mr. Egan saw cure in you." And the Wintertide Fellowship, she mentions, like, that Cobell was even better than anyone in the Wintertide Fellowship or the factory. And the only time we've heard Wintertide was Milchek in this scene a few episodes back.
"I feel I should remind you, you cannot graduate from this fellowship until I have deemed you Wintertide material."
But it's interesting, Milchek talking to Huang here, maybe that saying that she needs to be deemed ready for it. But maybe, I mean, this fellowship might be what they're talking about, Wintertide material, that this fellowship's still around, and Huang, that would be Huang's next stage of learning at Lumen. But Cobell runs to this room that I'm guessing is Sissy's room, and she sees a lot. There's a lot going on in this room, a very cluttered room, but the Tempers are clearly here, alongside a oh my gosh, Kier shrine, much like her own. And I mean, is this a goat riding a goat? I mean, we still don't really know what the goats mean. Maybe it has to do something with this town, and we just don't know yet. But she finds a key in the little box and opens her mother's door. She enters to her mother's room to see everything is dusted, old, weathered. The set design was great here in the weathering team. And she sees a picture of a girl in a schoolgirl outfit, much like the one that is on her shrine. I'm guessing it's still the same, like, picture of, like, her mother in front of the school. But Cobell brought her breathing tube with her, her mother's, Charlotte Cobell, and plugs it back in the machine, lies on the bed, and puts it in her mouth, which is, you know, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. But then she starts doing her version of crying. Imagine going to set one day as Patricia Arquette, and they're like, "Okay, you're gonna have to plug in your dead mother's breathing tube that was ripped out of her. You're gonna lay on her old bed where she died and stick it back in your mouth while you cry. And, you know, I mean, that's her job, I guess. And then we get one shot of this ruby necklace here. I don't think this means anything. I think it's just, you know, for, you know, the cinematography, just showing off a transitional shot while the crying continues. And it continues as we go to the ice and the waves, and time goes by while she forgets that she was driven here, and she just gets to take a nap while he's waiting. But I think it's such an interesting decision to have her crying, which then goes into like the music that kind of makes it make sense. But then we hear the man and Sissy arguing until he comes up the stairs to get her. Cobell says she still wants to find something she came here to look for. And Hampton says, I liked her, referring to their mother, to her mother. And says she hated Lumen more than I did, and that was enough for me to like her. And then says, you wanna get high? And then he gets high, he laughs and coughs, in definitely kind of a disturbingly way. She follows and does the same, and says she hasn't done that since she was 8, which that's problematic in itself. And then they talk about manning the vat for 10 hours, referring to their child labor again. And then she tells him it's so shameful that you sell it. Obviously, we know that from her. And then they kiss. Like, I mean, it was expected. You could tell, which is great acting job by then, that they had some chemistry just by looking at them. But it still seemed weird. It still seemed a little weird. And Cobell kind of comes to the realization that what she's looking for isn't in this house. But she says that her mother wouldn't throw it away and leaves the house. So this is something that, just that sentence there is a kind of a reveal that her mother knew about this secret thing that she hid inside James Egan's head. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she's just saying that James Egan's head would have never been thrown away. Okay, so I was going down the path there that her mother knew that Cobell had the first Lumen Severance designs in her notebook, and that she had that much of a connection with her mother that she would have never thrown it away. But maybe she's referring to Sissy, who would have never thrown away James Egan's head. I think that's what it is now, because of Sissy's obviously very religious towards Kier. Cobell goes to this little hobbit college, which is, I guess they call it a basement in the credits, but I guess it's kind of a basement. There's a lot of jars, and then there's this Kier Lumen notebook that says Annual Reminiscences. And then the Chosen One Kier, or in episode 1 they called it the Kier Hymn, H-Y-M, starts playing in the background. And there's Harmony Cobell written in memories as Wintertide Fellow. But this says, and it's kind of hard to read, you can see the page here, but it says, during a special ceremony, James Egan presented Harmony Cobell with something prestigious, Wintertide Fellowship. Harmony Cobell's outstanding dedication to the 9 core values has earned her the distinguished honor of being selected something. So basically she got selected for the Wintertide Fellowship in this scene here, which kind of, you know, is the start of Lumen's want for her, I guess. But after she looks at this, she looks around, she finds a statue of the head of James Egan. She opens it and gets another book that looks similar to this past one based on the cover, and she keeps the head. She brings the head and puts it in the car, which is interesting, even though she already separated the notebook. But she goes into the house and tells Sissy not to tell anyone that she was here, and says that Lumen destroyed this town. And Sissy says there was no town before the factory. Everything that you have, you owe back to the Egans as fealty. And Cobell was gonna leave, but she turns around and she shouts the word mine, and says, my design. This is my design, as she shows her ideas in her notebook of the Glasgow block, the overtime contingency, the circuits for the chip in the Severance procedure, and she hands them to Sissy, and I got a little scared. I was like, you do realize that she's putting stuff in the fire right now, like it's open. But she was told, apparently, that if she sought credit, that she would be banished, so she never told anyone. So Lumen obviously took advantage of her hero, Jane Egan, and they fight because Sissy tries to put it in the fire. They fight with their hands, and she manages to get her notebook back. Thankfully, I was worried she wouldn't, because I actually wanted Cobell to succeed here. But Sissy says, the kind of a reveal here, that her mother is actually one that removed her own tube, and that Cobell is a weed instead of a flower, such as her mother. And I mean, I don't think she's lying here. She could be, but I don't think she is. I think this is true. Maybe not that they were weeds, but that she removed her own tube. Then Hampton beeps and says someone is coming, so Cobell leaves. She enters the car, and Hampton stays behind, and this is where we get the reveal of his name. She says Hampton, kind of concerningly, and he says he'll be fine, lets her take the car, stays behind, and shouts, "Come tame these tempers, assholes." And so that's what he does. So I'm guessing it's someone from Lumen. He's familiar with Lumen, as familiar as Cobell is, or maybe not as much, since Cobell worked there, and I don't think he has. So there's that. Devin calls again, and Cobell answers as she drives away. Devin tells her that Mark is reintegrating. Cobell wants Mark on the phone. He gets on the phone, and then it ends there. Or sorry, it ends right after she says, "Tell me everything." And I've been wanting this for the longest time, since season 1. So it's like 3 years. But I've wanted Cobell to team up. I've wanted it because, I mean, there's been theories that she's been sort of not a Lumen woman the whole time, that she has her own agenda. And I mean, she was grown up in a Lumen environment, but I want her on the good side. That would be so amazing, so fun to watch. And I mean, it's kind of, there's a little bit more I can talk about here, but I was just thinking that my theory that the Cold Harbor will reach 100% in the finale of this season is looking like it'll become more true, as like episode 7 and 8 didn't really follow the main story. Like it didn't progress it much, but I mean, of course they're necessary episodes, but they didn't progress like Cold Harbor or anything. And they better not like reach 100% Cold Harbor. Something happens in the Cold Harbor room on the testing floor, and then the season ends with another cliffhanger. That'd be rough. But I mean, let's talk about some ideas and stuff. We got a lot of info in this episode. Maybe that this is the home of Lumen. I think that looks plausible. And that the ether mill was the one that they knew of, the factory. And then we also know that Helena, in episode 5, I think, Helena knew, or episode 3, Helena knew that Cobell had something on Lumen, some info. And I think this is it now. We know that there's the notebook of the info that she came up with the original designs, which is it's smart. It's smart writing, is a good twist. But we can also think a little bit back to this scene of Cobell being scared of this man, this driver at Lumen. It was in the previously on of this episode, which means, I mean, it means something. We already knew it was someone. She recognized someone from her past. We can make theories of who he is. I mean, it could be like anything. Maybe he's like the one who mentored her at Lumen and maybe scarred her. I don't know. But she drove all the way to Salt's Neck after seeing him, so there's that. And it was good to see Cobell again, because in the back of my mind, I'm like every episode I was like, okay, where's Cobell? We haven't seen her since episode 3. Here we are at episode 8, but she looks like she'll become more of a crucial role the rest of the season. But now it's the credits time, the after credits time. Stuff of note I will be mentioning from the after credits. One being that Dan Erickson says Lumen pulled a lot of natural resources from this place, and one of them was Cobell, who was pulled away from this town and seeing their effect on the real world. So that's interesting. She was pulled away from Lumen, and now she's coming back to the town, to the real people, and seeing the effect that Lumen has on them. Then they mentioned that they wanted to explore the source of Cobell's pain, gain some sympathy for Cobell, and they asked themselves who hurt her as a child, and they mentioned Sissy, and that she's her aunt. We get confirmation of that. I mean, that's the most plausible thing. But they talk about religion and Patricia Arquette mentions that religion and structure, combined with her love as a kid, didn't. They were conflicting, because the religion and structure taught her to think of one way, while she felt another toward her mother. Then they mentioned the filming location was Fogo Island, which is cool. It was a cool filming location. And that Cobell is realizing she hasn't been given her proper due, and that, combined with the damage to her town and the people that she has seen, she is leaning more towards something a little rebellious. We don't quite know what, but she's leaning towards not loving Lumen, which is interesting. It's exciting, and I mean, for a short episode, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of notes. Long video, as these normally go. And just thank you guys so much. Seriously, thank you so much for watching these. It makes me so happy. It does. But I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and you all enjoy next week. And have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.